Hello everyone, it's Cheryl Millett here live at 5, all things healthy. A number of things going on, as I interact with people walking around on the web and just different things by the phone. And it's interesting what's going on. Interesting how it's almost like if I had to describe it in a bubble, the world we're living in some ways is in a bubble. Now, some of you remember me actually talking about this book. I'm going to show you Sapiens, and you may or may not remember some of the things I have spoken about this book. Critical thinking is absolutely necessary in this book for many of the things that come about, but there was one key thing that popped out for me anyway. There could be as many as several ideas just in one page, and it's a 450-page book, and it is a brief history of humankind. There's a lot put in here in this one book. A lot of stuff is put in, and apparently I haven't read the reviews yet, nor have I actually listened to him. Apparently he's very popular. He's done a lot of interviews, but he puts a lot in here. What is interesting about this book, very interesting about this book, is the number of things he brings in, but also what those number of things that he brings in me sharing, all made up, manufactured, created, is the idea that he says this in the book. So it's cool to quote, right? And this guy is an international bestseller and so forth, so we can say anything about anybody about what's credible and not. It's made up. Whoever says this is credible and this isn't credible is made up. Who decides what is credible? Who decides, hi sis, what is correct? Who decides what needed to be put into the history books? Just laughable. Why wouldn't it be this way? The people who write the books are the victors when we're thinking about history. And see all the views that we have on various subjects, what gets taken into play for education, for what we need to believe. It's going to be one side, because there are going to be different ways of looking at this. In here, he says, everything is made up, people. So we think of debt, we think of epidemics, they're all made up. They're manufactured. They're created in some shape or form, maybe from centuries ago, millennia ago. The way religion has power over people, millennia ago. The way the financial institutions are set up, loan you money and you can't even pay it back. I mean, so debt's created. Fashion is created. Magazines are created. Words created. Books created. History is created. Everything is created. And I just went in here quickly because this is just kind of like a last minute, but it would just so kind of come into awareness. So again, this event is all inside a bubble. And inside this bubble, there's all the different pieces, and these pieces are fabricated for the reasons they are. For people to believe this, or for people to believe that, for people to do this, for people to do that. It is true, if people follow in the footsteps of what somebody says without critical thinking, without going in and checking, it sounds groupie-like, it sounds, people just following and things like that. The idea is that it'll happen to different degrees, and in some cases people will say, well, that doesn't fall into that, and that falls. So we've got all these contradictions, perhaps, these exceptions, perhaps, all of these things. But I just wanted to read this here. When we think of what's also man-made, alone, feeling alone, man-made, loneliness and privacy. So in the past, as he talks into here, such things as cooperation and community were very strong. And because if we feel we don't have it today, it's because we created it. We created it. It's our own creation. This is why some people will say you got to take responsibility. If you are feeling this way, if you are unhealthy, sorry, there we go, choking. So, who knows why? Anyway, the other thing that's created, I'm going to work it my way through it because we can, is racial or racism myths. I'll keep drinking a little bit and it'll work its way out. But even in the Sapien books as well, it goes into quite detail how much of the things were created. Worshipping gods. So any of the any things around that, fairies. Now he talks about some things as not being believable, or some things being believable, and some things that. But the whole thing around myths and the whole thing around all the different gods and how people did things because they chose to, where did those gods come from? Or where did the creation of those gods exist? And most of us won't be able to answer those questions. The Greek gods. And how many of us actually studied the Greek gods in great lengths? I mean, we read books, we studied them. Why? Why would we study them? Very interesting. Borders, that's the other thing. Think about how the world is divided up in borders and countries. That was made up, that was manufactured, that was fabricated. It was brought in somehow, somewhere by certain people. Wars, you can read all kinds of books on wars and how they were fabricated to annihilate people, to and preferably annihilate so that you're actually bringing together groups of people, less bigger and bigger control, working towards control of a larger space. And in here they talk about it, and we can look at it as our own Inuit people in the 50s, sort of an assimilation. So assimilation, annihilation, wars, corruptions, all created. Anything that certain groups of people would do, the corporate structure, all created. Once upon a time, if you know the movies, you've read the books, they didn't have that kind of corporate structure, that kind of business where people sat in offices all day and not happy, as they say with the Poles, many of them, and then but this is unhealthy. So we seem to be moving in a direction. Obviously, if we look in hindsight, it's a direction we've been moving in, and it's all created. And so that was one of the key things about Sapiens that was very interesting, as he says in very few words, everything has been created. Everything that we think and can believe and whatever. We wanted to think a certain dog acted a certain way, and some people just tell it for whatever, they just observe and they decide that's how we're going to think about this dog behaving. It's created, it's written, it's lectured about. Does that mean it's true? Not necessarily. The thing about fears are created. Fears are absolutely created, and they can be created, as we know, this whole event, fear. If anybody had common sense, why would you want to create fear? I mean, you just wouldn't want to create fear. But why are we creating a bunch of fear? But why we've moved to creating people outside of ourselves to know better for us? A lot of people, including myself, guilty of following certain things, following this process, following this protocol, taking these particular, these foods or way of trying diet and stuff like that. It's all made up. So if we can get out of the bubble of our life, I guess you can say, into the greater life outside of a bubble, we're going to see that everything's been created in how we look at each other, as to how we need to look. Perfection in that regard. Conditions come in various things, the drive, the sex drive that people have, the strippers, that having that, to do all the needs, all the things to meet the needs, the thirst of, the addictions of, all of this has been created. And we have to ask the question, if common sense prevails that every one of us would rather be happy, at peace, safe, and healthy, why would these things be created? Now we know we have free will, and that's why. So capitalism is just really free will, but in a business model. That's really what it is. And because they can. Outside of this bubble, we can also look in and see the labels that are given around. And I was speaking to a good friend today, Roseanne, and I've never lost, because we actually clicked on that one point, labels, 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 and she's so we were talking about living without labels, but that is all being created, right? The conspiracy theorists, so that wasn't around for very long. The anti-vaxxer, that hasn't been around for very long. The titles of groups, the statements that we make, all, Black Lives Matter, all of these things that come in are labels. I care for none of them, really. I care to call this an event. I don't want to use the words and labels that they want to put into our head to really be associated with the fears and whatever else people think is going on today, which is people, please do your research. Look, Italy, 90 plus, they didn't even have COVID. The paperwork in the government, 50%, they increased the death numbers by 50%. Why? Because in Europe, they had some sort of a, I don't know, some sort of research, something that determined that there was probably undetected deaths. As crazy as that sounds, there's no basis for it unless you go, okay, we weren't doing the testing. Okay, so there's so many questions, so many things to think about. But we create models, we create theories, and I mean, much of science is theory, if you hypothetical, if you read the language, if you read enough research, these key words are in there, may. When they say may, it means they mean may be. This means this. It doesn't mean it's true. So if you go ahead and just read a few things and the languages that's there, and not just believing anybody who ever says anything. That's the thing. So, I mean, fear about snakes and spiders. That's made up, people. From the moment you look at a spider as an adult and you have a young toddler beside you and you get freaked out, and I laugh. I still laugh at this. We're human. How many thousands or whatever millions times bigger are we than a spider? And we know it's not even poisonous, yet people will freak out. It's insane, people. That is made up. The fears, and then of course they want to say, oh, it's probably in our DNA because so many people have it. Ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. We'd be so at peace at nature if we didn't have these ridiculous, made up, crazy things. You're going to cut your foot because you're walking barefoot. That doesn't have to happen. That doesn't have to happen. And then I'd say, well, why even get in your car and drive then? You could get in a car accident. So, well, of course we got to work. Okay, well, then this is the exceptions. You want to work towards this, but you don't want to work towards that. But at the end of the day, everything is made up. And we can have proof of different things, and we can argue different subtle things, and of course, but, cars are made up. Well, you're going to go drive a car, you have, bigger things, faster speed, the higher you are, the harder you fall, those kind of things. This is just where safety comes into play, right? Just comes into play. Common sense comes into play. But something isn't right, so that's really where I fall and lay in much of this information, is to understand something's not right. The epidemics are crazy. The projections are crazy as far as diabetes and cancer. It's insane. It's all made up, people. Made up projections. How would they even know? That tells me, again, I've said this before, zero confidence in the medical community, and yet people want to fall over backwards and go, oh, I got this, I'm going to go into the doctor. Listen, I love doctors. I love all people. You know, the idea is that they are, and I know many doctors, and the idea is they have to say certain things, and they cannot say certain things, and they're trained a certain way, and they're indoctrinated to believe certain things. And if you're in the world of something, you're gonna kind of go along with it. Otherwise, you're going to be left out, ostracized, like some doctors, some OEs. Yeah, he's just ostracized enough, so he just kind of went mental. I mean, that's what can happen when you know something to be true, and you actually do it, and it actually works out well, and then others don't, and there's literally hundreds and thousands of women dying. You really want to. I mean, there's doctors, paramedics, dentists committing suicide. And these are good people. These are seeing. They're seeing what is happening, and they understand. So I just was in a dog park a few months ago, if you didn't hear me talk about this story, and I don't know how we got on. I said, I haven't been to a dentist in 10 years. We're talking about health. And I said, because I believe that when they are scraping our teeth as hard as they scrape out, they're taking our natural enamel off. And it takes a year, maybe less for some, more for others, to grow back that enamel. So by going every year, once a year, every 6 months, and then some every 4 months, and getting your teeth cleaned, your teeth don't have a chance to grow back their enamel. And you know what he said? He looked at me and said, you're right, Cheryl. You're right. The idea is we have to think for ourselves. I can't stress that enough. Common sense, nature is at the core of how things work. Nature, not unnatural, but undernatural, not undernatural. Nature itself has a lot to teach us, and simplicity is at the core of it. Simplicity, that's it. I mean, I could tell you things I've done, and that most people would absolutely feel they have to go to the dentist and then go to a specialist, and then, oh, it's got to be here, and then it probably play on their mind and get fearful. It's going to be, and then read different things, that things happen to people, and it's crazy. So fabricated, made up, manufactured everything. We can think of just agriculture is all made up. That's not in the wild. So our foods are fabricated. Fake meat, crazy, absolute crazy, people. But these are the things that are coming in. Why is a very good question, and I think some of you will know the answer, and I'm not going to answer that. I'm not going to answer that. I have different things to say about that, and nothing's black and white. There's all kinds of shades, exception, and if you want to be here all night, we'd be here all night, all week, all month, all year. Talking about the different things, but absolutely snakes and spiders. I wanted to mention that story. I decided as a mother, as a person, as my own scientist, let's just say, if we're observing, we're all scientists. The idea is I decided that I would not show fear towards spiders and snakes. Now, snakes, not so much in our world, but spiders, absolutely. And if you've seen them lately, they're hatching all their baby ones. But the idea is I never showed any fear. I showed curiosity. We had the containers to collect bugs. So when it comes to insects and bugs, we'd be right in their face. Now, I would sometimes coach the children a little bit to be curious on what they look at, and we don't want to frighten them. We don't want to do any of that. So the idea is it was just, we did this and realized, they need water, they need their natural habitat, they need to eat, and all things eat, so all things poop. These are just very basic, simple things to understand. They never showed any fear towards spiders until one of their friends, and I remember the older one, she came onto the porch, and I think my daughter pointed out a spider, or she saw the spider, and she flipped out, like super drama, super drama. Not even so natural that you'd want to put it in a movie, but it would be just like that, drama. And ever since then there was a bit of time there where my daughter would want to respond and did respond the same way. Is it peer pressure? Is it learned? I mean, much of the things we've learned. So we can question, where did it come from? Where did our learnings come from? How do we look at common sense thinking? What does that mean to you? How would you describe common sense? We hear these words, but are we actually looking at what they mean? And is there different meanings for different people? And that would be the question. So we're all creators. We are creating whatever we like to create. We want to create a closet full of clothes. We want to create having 1,000 shoes. We create. You want to create a certain car, a certain vehicle. I want to build a certain house. You want to create very simple. You want to create music. You want to create art. You're creating. You want to create a false sense of who you are, of self. That you have to be this way. You have to act. You're creating it. You're creating. Is it coming from somewhere? Well, that's a good question, because marketing and artificial intelligence and all of those will tell you that psychology is a real thing, and they will use it so that you buy things, that you believe things, that you think a certain way. If we don't understand psychology at just that level, then we're not stepping out of that bubble. You know, the bubble where everything is created, where everything is fabricated, where everything is manufactured. And we are creators at so many different levels. And you've heard the word manifesting. And maybe you've watched The Secret. And maybe there's some truth to that. And I can tell you absolutely there is, because I've played with it, wanted to understand manifesting, and it happened naturally. It happened where I didn't even know it was going to happen. I didn't even think about it as going, I'm going to manifest right now. I just put it out there, and then it happened. And then you kind of have to let it go, as in, no, now you don't want to control it. That's not how. We don't control, to a certain degree, to a lot of degrees, we don't control the weather. We don't control nature. And if we try to control nature, well, you can weaken the plants, as in they're not wild anymore, and then they become dependent upon your assistance in growing. You can deplete the soil of nutrients because you're constantly putting in the same plant and all of those things. So when we decide to control because we think what's better, we're probably losing sight. We start to put on the blinders, and we start to be in this bubble. And if I can describe this bubble as in many layers. So there's the core, and then it's just like many layers, like an onion. The bubble is many layers. How many layers? I don't know. Maybe some people have more layers and other people have less layers, but there's lots of layers. And the idea is we may start in the core, and once we start questioning, maybe we step out to the next layer, and maybe we were questioning on little things, but then we start to question on bigger things, you know, like religion. And then you can see all of these different layers will be different for everybody. Your first layer, second layer will be different than my first, second layer. It depends, you know, how we're brought up, our environment, our teachers, what we're being learned. And so eventually you just can't, as they say, constantly step back, step back, step back. And there's all these things that we can get into doing, put ourselves in other people's shoes. But here's one of the things I want to say that probably comes way outside of the outer limits of this bubble, is love. Love without the conditioning. Without the conditioning. Love probably isn't made up. That the love that's unconditional is not made up. It is a thing. It's a feeling. It's a vibration. Maybe it's the highest vibration, as somebody says, but it's part of everything. It's when you can look at something, maybe your newborn baby, and that feeling, it almost hits you here. So if everybody, whoever's had children, a pet, for instance, even just the thought of losing a pet that you've had for many years, it'll hit you right here, right in the center. That love, 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 you cannot manufacture that. You cannot, somebody can't create that for you. It's there, it exists, it's all around us. It comes in maybe different ways, as in babies and pets, and being in nature and admiring the ocean, looking at the beauty in the flowers, the variety of colors, the different things in our planet that can give us joy and peace. Right? So I just kind of wanted to come on tonight and say that, because it was all just came down, and people are definitely sharing different things with respect to what I'm speaking about and what I'm sharing. Credibility on one side, this is the way it is on the other side. And at the end of the day, by staying in the bubble, we're losing sight that people, all the people on this planet, yes, they would, most of them, but people can get offside for the reasons they get offside, and that has created wars. Absolutely. It's kind of greed and power, and absolutely, we've seen it in children. We've probably experienced in some ways, and you just kind of wake up one day and go, it doesn't really matter. Our health matters, our loved ones matter, and so this is all manufactured. The viruses are natural. We gotta, loving everything about nature, from the worms to the, they're decomposing things, to the maggots, to the, the seeds, the thorns on the rose bush, like everything that's a part of nature is there to teach us a magnitude of things, and it is simpler than you think. And there's nothing more common sense than looking at, you water a plant and it perks up. Common sense, right? Common sense. If this doesn't happen, or if that happens, the common sense is there. That's really all I wanted to talk about today. I think, I don't want to make this a crazy heavy topic or anything. It's really just is. That just is. So again, the core here is everything is made up. Everything is manufactured. How we think we need to look, or how we should do our houses, how we should act, how we should present, how we should, the whole banking system, the whole religion system, all the gods and anything that's ever existed, the belief that we have to do something in order to happen. Everything is manufactured. All the feelings are manufactured, and a lot of people are feeling what they're feeling because it's fabricated. It's manufactured in some way, shape, or form. I know this may seem like I'm simplifying it. I am, but it doesn't mean that there's not black or white and shades here. Absolutely, that's not the case. So to get along, we can absolutely get along, people. We don't need lawyers as much as people think we do. We can work things out. We can work things out. We are capable. We have to understand that we are quite capable of so much. It's not funny. But as I said, the environment, when the environment is unhealthy, it creates all kinds of things, chaos and havoc, and just the mere fact that the people who have various diseases and conditions are vulnerable. It's all together. I hope this is kind of making the picture kind of come together, like we've just sat down now and built a small puzzle out of what I've just talked about. I'm not saying it is one of those things that you can jump into, step into right away. Sometimes it's about processing things, processing things and see what it means for you. And this is, does it take this much time, that much time? But I will say that having conversations with some people may be interesting and may kind of bring different things to the table. But if you can figure it out on your own or process it on your own, that's another way of looking at it. Maybe you do both. I don't know. What is there to talk about? All those kind of good stuff. So there you go. I think everything is coming together, and definitely things are being shaken out of the whatever, hiding, out of their boxes, out of the closets, out of the tunnels, wherever. Things are kind of shaken. We don't need privacy in some ways. We don't need to hide things. Why should any of us feel like we need to hide anything? What's there to hide? We're all capable of so many things, everything and anything. We think, oh my gosh, what will people think if I've done this? Well, the many things that we've done are the reasons we've done things, right? And the whole forgiveness, self-forgiveness, all those things come into play. But I'm going to leave it as that. Everything's fabricated. And if you read this book, put your critical thinking hat on, because he says a lot, and it just ties into many of the things that that I might have been talking about, that other people kind of talk about. But I definitely wouldn't take this as truths in some ways, and in other ways I would take it as absolutely they're showing just how horrific capitalism is, absolutely, and him calling you stupid for buying into it. Just think of consumerism, just think of the many things. But anyway, for another day. So I'm going to leave it as that. I'm going to wish everybody a wonderful evening, and just look around. Just look around. There's your tool. There's your exercise. Just look around and just see what is manufactured. At the end of the day, nature outside is created, but it's not fabricated. It's not made up. Well, maybe it is a certain degree, but not like everything else. And how you think, and is it real? Is this person really the person you thought they were? Are you really the person people think you are? There you go. So take care, everyone. Good luck with that exercise. Have fun with it, and we will be live at 5 at some point another day. Take care. Bye, everybody.